Welcome to Mitcham Hills Church Online. We've got a great morning ahead of us, wherever you're at this week, whatever you've been doing, whether you're grateful for what's going on in your life, or you've got burdens or anxieties, I pray that this next message allows you to take your next step of faith. Over to Ran.
Do you ever get confused between real life and online? Do you ever feel torn between speaking to people online and in real life? Let's do a social media poll, shall we? Put your hand up if you have social media on your phone. So, what I mean by that, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, Discord, dating apps, gaming apps, and any other number of possible apps that might facilitate online community. Stick your hand up if you happen to have one. Leave them up, leave them up, leave them up. Okay, leave them up if you have over 50 followers. This is where my hand would have gone down, just so you don't feel bad, all right? Leave your hand up if you have over 100. Nice and high. Over 200. 300. That killed off a few. 400. All right. I won't ask. 20 years ago, we couldn't play that game. Isn't that funny? 20 years ago. Not very long. The growth of the internet and social media has been one of the largest technological impacts on our society over the last 20 years. Social media connects people, facilitates business. We learn on them, commit ourselves to causes through them, and experience just about anything that we're looking for online. Now, understandably, most people prefer to keep their follower list confidential. We don't want to show our follower list just to anybody. And that's because our follower list reflects a lot about us. So my first point this morning is who you follow tells us a lot about you. I want to talk about following this morning. And to do that, I want to start with a really, really simple example. So simple, in fact, it's an old example. Pre-social media. In fact, it's an ancient example. It goes way back. It's an ancient example of following. So Anne read from the book of Acts in the Bible, but let me recap. The city of Ephesus in the ancient world was a cultural centre, and they worshipped this Greek god by the name of Artemis. Now, Paul was travelling around. He was an early Christian teacher, and he was talking in all of the town centres throughout the area about Jesus. In this account of Paul's visit to Ephesus, it's really interesting that the main protagonist in the story, a silversmith named Demetrius, was able to repeat quite clearly what Paul was teaching around the place. So Paul must have been preaching much the same thing wherever he went. Paul's basic message was, all of these gods you're worshipping are made with human hands. So they're really not gods, are they? God is much bigger than that. He made everything, including you, and you can know him through Jesus. Demetrius was one of the many tradespeople who made shrines in Ephesus. We might call shrines idols. Okay, so if you're not familiar with what an idol is in the ancient world, it was a small statue or ornament-looking thing that you'd put in your home and you would bow down to it and you would worship whatever god the idol represented. In this case, Artemis for the Ephesians. Demetrius, really annoyed, stirred up this crowd because he said their livelihood was under threat if people believed Paul and stopped buying their idols. Demetrius also said the goddess Artemis would be robbed of her divine majesty if people stopped buying their idols. So, people got so upset, they rioted. Total confusion. Everyone shouting. The whole city came to a standstill. They all rushed into the centre of town. The riot was eventually quelled by a clever public servant. He said the Christians hadn't broken any laws, and that was really up to the courts. So let's go and see the courts tomorrow, shall we? But by the way, all of you lot that are rioting are breaking the law. So let's stop that, shall we? This is a story about who you follow and what happens when you do. So, here's 4 things I noticed from this story about following idols. Number 1, idols were an important part of Ephesus society. Most people had an idol in their home that they used to worship Artemis. But it's more than that. It wasn't just a social thing, the whole economy was dependent on it. People's jobs, manufacturing, business, all connected to the worship of idols. Interesting, isn't it? Number 2, an idol has a hold on you. When you worship something, your life revolves around it. It's the ultimate thing in your life, so you really, really, really need it. That's why the very thought that their idols were under threat brought on such anxiety and anger that the Ephesians completely lost control of themselves and rioted. Idols have a hold on you. Number 3, idols promise to fulfill your desires, but they deliver frustration and dissatisfaction. Artemis is supposed to be the centre of all things in Ephesus, the glue holding together their community because she is supposedly a god and worshipped by everyone. But as the town clerk points out, it's not the Christians who are disturbing the social order. It's the followers of Artemis. So following Artemis wasn't causing this great community, it was having the opposite effect. The community was falling apart. Idols promise to fulfill your desires, but they just don't deliver. And number 4, Christianity and idols are opposed to each other. So, an idol promises so much, but if you follow it, you'll be dependent on it, but ultimately frustrated because you'll never really get what's promised. Well, you say, thanks for that. We don't really follow idols these days, do we? Okay, let's go and think about what Paul said again. He said, gods made by human hands are no gods at all. An idol is something you make with your hands. Now let's think about what's different between the ancient Ephesians and us. Traditional societies are very communal. The beliefs of a community hold together the community. So if worshipping Artemis is a belief of the community, then you'll be ending up worshipping Artemis. But Western societies like us, that each of us are born into, that we know nothing else but being in a Western society, are fundamentally individualistic. You will not tell me what to do. You will not tell me what to believe in. I am in charge of myself, not you. I, and only I, can shape my life the way that I want to. I am a self-made person. I make myself into who I want to make myself into. In our society, we make our own lives. And our whole society, in person, online, is made for you and me to pick and choose what we want to make our lives as we see fit. And today, to do that, we follow. We follow people, we follow places, we follow organisations, we follow online, we follow in person. I said at the start, if we looked at your follower list, we get an insight into who you are, but more important than that, we get an insight into what you're building, what you're making with your hands on your keyboards. Because who or what you're following is who or what you're spending your time on, spending your money on, spending your time thinking about, reading about, and meeting your preferred kinds of people. Who or what you follow is really just a reflection of what's most important to you. Interesting, isn't it? Now you might say, but following is just following, surely. It's not making a God, is it? Well, our culture used to think of religion and spirituality in terms of churches. That's changed. Spirituality and religion are now individualised. Tara Isabella Burton's recent book, Strange Rites, looks at modern spiritual practices and why people have deserted churches in favour of more custom-built spiritual practices, which you make for yourself. She has an enormous range of examples, so let me just pick one group out of all of those: wellness culture. Wellness culture globally is a $4.2 trillion business. This includes fitness, beauty, health, and spirituality. She gives this really, really fascinating example of Soul Cycle. Soul Cycle is a combination of cycling and meditation. You may not have heard of it, but Soul Cycle is this enormous organisation. It has about 90 locations across the US, and it's worth about 900 mil. They have almost 400,000 Instagram followers. Soul Cycle, the book says, is like a religion. Instructors stand on a raised platform, imagine this, raised platform in the room, surrounded by candles. And participants cycle furiously in a semicircle around the raised platform, and instructors shout out mantras such as, "Today is all about you. You are created by a purpose for a purpose." And participants are encouraged to have a tribal loyalty to each other, a special time with an instructor, so that the experience of Soul Cycle becomes a source of order and structure in the participants' everyday week. How interesting. Soul Cycle is just one example from among the hundreds Burton gives in her book. Her point is that people flock in person and online to health-related organisations who provide a service from fitness to mental health to beauty, all of them with a spiritual dimension. All of them have a spiritual dimension and because people want spirituality, they do, they shop around and pick activities that attract them, and they're making their own tailor-made spirituality. Wellness culture is only one example from the global economy, which is pitching spiritual belonging to people who want to build their own spirituality. Burton concludes that churches are emptying out because of two main factors that are driven by our individualism. People have become anti-institutional because they've lost their trust in institutions like church. Don't tell me what to do. And because of the impact of the internet, people now simply choose their preferred beliefs and spiritual practices from an endless range of choices. They make their own personal God. The World Wide Web provides a spirituality that you can buy into, commit to, and tailor-make for you. Making your own God is no different today than it was then. But regardless of whether you make your own God via the World Wide Web or make them in a more traditional community setting of the Ephesians, it's the same result. Let's go back to my 4 points, shall we? Number one, idols are just as important in our social structure as they are in Ephesus. Our society, because it's so individualistic, means that everything is focused on satisfying our individual desires. Business is focused on meeting our desires. So they sell products to us to build gods. Number 2, idols have a hold on you. In our individualistic society, anything you want can be an idol. Any good thing or any person can become an idol when that thing or person becomes the most important thing in our lives. Each of us will end up worshipping something when that something or someone becomes an ultimate thing for us. Our lives will revolve around it. How do I know what my idols are, you might say? Well, remember the Ephesians. They became very anxious and angry when their idols were under threat, and their behaviour went completely out the door. Same with us. When our idols are under threat, we get unreasonably fearful and anxious. Ask yourself this: what is it specifically that makes you unreasonably angry or fearful? Don't get promoted, so your world's ended. When a relationship breaks down, you fall into a deep, long-lasting depression. Your presentation flops and you feel utterly humiliated because your power and influence over others is threatened. You get cut out of a social group, so you just don't know what to do with your life. You delete Facebook or Insta and you think nobody likes you anymore. And there are always other factors that are involved here, but the idea here is that your reaction to losing an idol is way out of control, way out of what is your normal. Our idols are the things we cannot bear to be without. Number 3, idols promise to fulfill your desires, but they only ever deliver frustration and dissatisfaction. Same in our society. You have a sexual idol, you'll always be dissatisfied. You want success, you'll always have to climb just one more rung of the ladder. You like money and things, you will just never have enough. Idols promise everything, they deliver nothing. And lastly, Christianity and idols are opposed to each other. The Bible tells us that the God who created the universe wants us to worship Him alone. Everything else that we make with our hands are just a substitute for the real thing. If you're a Christian, just like Paul, when you share the gospel with somebody, you are always going to be speaking against the addictions people have to their gods. There will be conflict. The Christian message to the world is the same today. And that is that the God you're cultivating with your own hands is not really God. The God of the Bible is infinitely much bigger than something you can make with your hands. He is infinitely much bigger than you or I and this world. Yet, He is more personal than our closest friend. This is the God who made everything and made us to be in relationship with Him. This is the God, when we were dismally failing to follow Him, when we were pathetically trying to make our own gods and follow them, that's when He sent His Son for us. Each of us, in our own way, are trying to save ourselves because we're working hard to make something of ourselves so that we can just be something. Yet we fail. We fail because we just can't make what needs to be made. And so God, in His love for us, gave us a way of knowing Him, resting in Him, finding peace in Him, through a relationship with Jesus. And here we have what makes Christianity so opposite to the idol factory of our society. God sent His own Son to suffer and die for us. When we were powerless, He acted entirely out of love and grace. This is not a religion based on me. This is not a self-development movement. It's not something I make. It's a gift we receive. God's fundamental characteristic is that he's for us. Amen. And we can do nothing to earn that. He only wants us to receive it. We are not here to sell something. We don't want your money. We want you to know God's grace and love and be in relationship with him. It's not self-regarding. It's other-regarding. Jesus denied himself and suffered for us. At the heart of Christianity is a sacrifice for others, for us. That's the model for us to live by. We don't come to church for self-improvement, although you'll get that. You don't come to church just to get your spiritual fix. Well, you might get that too. We certainly come to be in community, but our posture to each other at church, like our posture in our homes, at work, in our neighbourhoods, is other-regarding. Serving, giving. We are here for others and not for ourselves. Let me finish by asking, what are you making with your hands, on your keyboards, on your phones? Each of us spends such a significant part of our time online. Sometimes people spend more time online than they do in person. We chat, buy, sell, meet people, subscribe to channels, flirt, argue, influence. We do business. What are you making with your hands? Are your hands busy making a god? Busy building a self-made life? Perhaps blissfully unaware that you're constantly giving that thing or that person ultimate importance in your life, and so getting consumed by it, giving your worship to it, and so dependent upon the feeling of importance or comfort or security you receive from it, but slowly getting confused, frustrated, eventually cynical and calloused because it just doesn't deliver. Or do you come open-handed to Jesus? Open-handed before the God who made you and this world. Open-handed because you recognise you'll only ever be satisfied in relationship with him. Open-handed because you know you can't do anything and that he has done it all. Follow Jesus. Follow Jesus. Let me pray for you. Let's pray. Father, in our society, we keep on going to other things. We keep on worshipping other things, other people, and yet they deliver nothing for us. We are sorry. Lord, help us to have an undivided heart, a heart which is for you, our Creator and our God. Help us to worship you and you alone. Thank you for your love and grace to us. Help us to live in that. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, that was a great message from Ran, and I just pray that as we think about idols and who we follow, that you would be able to think about Jesus as being the person that you want to follow in your life. Just a reminder, we don't have church next weekend because it's a long weekend, but I pray that you have a great week. Thanks for being a part of Mitcham Hills Church Online.